To welcome you to the final meeting of this triennium of the Finance and Services Committee. So welcome all. We've got Kia Story, Ebone, Barnard and Cookson. Online we've got Councillor here. Ask Janine if she would open.
Chair, morena koutou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia ākina ki te, kia e hiaki ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, i hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Janine. The health and safety instructions have been included in your agenda and we're all familiar with those, so happy to pass on that. Apologies. I have got apologies for early departure for the story. So that,
Just, Mr. Chair, so I just need to step out at 10:20 and then able to come back just after 11:30, depending. The committee is still sitting.
Thank you, Pam. That's good. So, thanks, Mikhail. Stu. Favour? Carried. Okay. Confirmation of the agenda has been circulated. Can I move the acceptance of the agenda, please? Thank you. Favour? It's carried. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. Does anybody have disclosures of interest to notify the council? Not. We'll move on to the minutes for receipt. Move. Thank you, Pamela. Bobby, seconded. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, the next agenda item is our Te Aratapu update. Oh, sorry, matters arising. Janine, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Quickly.
It's all good. We had 3 matters that were captured from the last committee meeting with the status of those all reported. One of them around information on actual and forecast reserve balances. That's included in your agenda today. We can talk about that when we get to the financial performance reporting. The enterprise data strategy, the document that you were unable to access should now be on the website. And we've just noted a process for the cyclical review of eligibility for some of our remission policies.
Excellent.
All those closed off.
Thank you for that, Janine. Have any questions for Janine on this rising? Not. Have a move for the resolution. Thanks, Stu. Kyle, on favour? It's carried. Thank you. Right, Te Aratapu. Emma, turn to start.
Hear me all right?
Yes, that's good, thank you.
So, as normal, I'll just be presenting the live dashboard screen there. And as we go through each of the focus areas, I'll highlight some of those from the report. This being the end of financial year performance, as shown, screen there, we have not progressed, I guess, as much as we have done in previous years. The culture area is probably the one area that has sort of down overall, but our other 4 areas have improved in performance. And we'll go through that shortly. Start with the culture area. As we can see there, those first 5 measures there, those are all corresponding to the pulse survey. So that's just giving us an indication that at the moment, or at the point of time that pulse survey was conducted. The general well-being of staff that was lower than it has previously been. We've also had a few other measures that have off track. That's our absenteeism, annual leave, and time to fill. Some of these, though, have been deliberately done just due to some of the restructure changes going on. Some of them had to take a hit for that to occur. But as we can see, our staff turnover rate is still within the target range. And one of the areas that has been seeing some really good, our training and development areas. So that's our leadership development program. It's undergone a big review, and we're rolling that out alongside the Be My Best program, which has just started. And we have our people strategy as signed off, and it should be launched in the near future. Moving on to the customer space. This area is one of our top performing areas, and I think that's attributed largely to the fact that we have that customer experience program that is continually focused on improving these metrics. We have had, as discussed in the last meeting, we've had RTC come on board, and one of our, I might just show this in the report, but RTC's response rates here have the ability to bring this data into Te Ara Tupu has been able to show that processes maybe not have been aligned completely across council, and this has shown that and enabled us to really target that and uplift performance. An example is seen in the total mobility. The customer team is able to take all of those general inquiries, and as they're specialised in doing that every day, they've just been able to improve the response rates to our customers and allow RTC to deal with aspects of the inquiries. So I think that's a positive outcome there. And looking down at our comms measures, our Facebook follower growth rate is consistently performing well, and that is actually really hard to do, to continuously increase your followers, because there is always going to be people that unfollow you and don't want to hear or listen to you anymore. So this is actually a really positive issue here. And our website NPS, we're going to have a review of this data because it's not showing us helpful data. There's no real trend here. There's nothing that we can really respond to, or so this measure will be reviewed with Com and will onto the excellence. This focus area has had a new measure brought in recently, and that is the emissions reduction measure. So this is our corporate emissions reduction, and this has been really good to sort of raise the profile of what it is that individuals can do to impact our emissions reduction. It also shows that we are on track to achieving our 2030 goal of having 68% reduction. Baseline result. There is in June, you can see a dip and cyclone. So we just have a really basic straight line. A straight line target, and that doesn't really account for those fluctuations. But when we look at it as a whole, it actually tells quite a good story. by implementation plan. So not quite achieved that 100% financial year. However, at 85%, it's still a really good result. And that 15% details in the report showed where we accounted for those that we missed. Some of those timelines being pushed out due to them being associated with other projects, and also things that were external to our control, which I have highlighted 3 of those measures. That will be just to highlight those. Removing the 2 measures associated with Plan Change 1. These are completely externally controlled and we're unable to really be able to achieve them within our set timelines. So that is being removed. It's also already a priority for us to follow through with that. And the flood modelling is linked in with a national project. So that one has also, that will just simplify the plan moving. PSODA also well surpassed our target, and that's just as a result of the EWM program that has come in and really given some put some effort into identifying all of the projects. Council, there will be potentially some additional measures that we can bring into Te Aratuku as a result of EWM bring further metrics. Innovation, there has been no new innovations and no change from our previous case. However, just enabling a focus area that is around innovation gives staff a really good, enables them to be able to use innovation or think. Our Te Ao Māori focus area as well has performed well and is progressing. With Raukawa, there has been some specific movement forward with the development of their program, and the 19 potential activities have been identified. And Tairanga Whenua has worked with Raukawa to align these so that they fall, so that we are able to look at what needs funding and align that with our LTP process. Any questions?
Emma, thanks very much. Good report. And I guess I could say 85% positive, which is good news, in line with your 85% figure. Maybe just a couple of observations, and one I don't know whether Janine or Chris wants to answer, and that's really in relation to the negative impact culture from the latest survey. I wonder how much of that's related to the disruption which has been going on internally from ICM review. Chris, do you want to comment on that or not?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's the results weren't even across the organisation. Some directorates had less positive results than other ones. And integrated catchment management was one that was in the thick of reviews, and we got plenty of feedback on that, didn't we, Emma? Also in the transport space, and I see Phil sitting in the room as well, and he's trying to address some of the matters that have come through the reporting there at the moment. Pleasingly, some of other directorates which had been on a bit of a journey to improve actually had showed quite a lot of improvement. And so that's the pleasing part of it. I'm just trying to paint the picture. It wasn't even everywhere,
yep.
And we're trying to address the issues as they are in different places. And I'm hoping the review outcomes are going to help with that. Pleasingly, the corporate organisations, and Janine, you might want to comment on that, but that seems to be going quite well at the moment. You know, can get construction in those spaces, but that seems to be going quite smooth. Emma's in that, she might want to comment.
Yeah.
as well.
I'll leave the room and leave Emma to comment. Yeah, I think
Thanks, Chris.
in terms of from a corporate perspective, week 3 of the new directorate, so still early days, but certainly I think there's a lot of positivity that's being felt about the change. It certainly, I guess, hasn't had the long duration that the ICM staff feel that they've had through that change process, but still work to do to bed in, some thoughts, ways of working, structures, those types of things. But message from me to the team is basically nothing's broken. We'll carry on, and then look at areas of focus that we might want to address together.
Thanks for that, Janine, and that's extremely encouraging to hear. So delighted to hear things are moving forward positively and settling down. So next, look forward to a different metric result. Culture in the next report.
Let's make another comment through, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Good.
It is an area that ELT is looking at the moment. How we're taking a deep breath and saying we've been doing things in a certain way for a period of time. We're looking at that at the moment in terms of how we do various aspects of the leadership development, learning and development, how we measure measuring the culture going forward. We're just, in line with maybe some of the conversations and CERC that you'd have been aware of, we're just taking an opportunity to have a recheck how we're doing that to make sure we've got our finger, I suppose, on the pulse in the right way.
Good, very appropriate. Okay, and I guess some of those negatives, it's middle of winter, so you expect some of those metrics to be going the way they were. So I'm seeing that as a negative at all. And the positive coming out of there was the effect that training's having on the morale and engagement of people. I think that's a key measure. Just shows how important it is to keep people upskilled in what they're doing and understanding what their objectives are in terms to achieve. So, now, has anybody else got any questions, please?
Thank you.
If not, I'd have to say thank you very much, Emma, and we've got a resolution here. Performance update. Thank you, Mikhail. Just want to see. Thanks, Pam. All in favour? Carried. Thank you, Emma. Get on with the real job. So next up we have Jane to join us. Thank you, Jane. Non-financial performance results to the 30th of June. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So this report provides the committee with draft unaudited non-financial performance results for 24-25 and attached to the full results that will be provided to Audit New Zealand to conduct an audit process. So the draft results show that 44 of the Council's 50 performance targets have been met for the financial year 24-25. One target has been achieved in part and 3 have not been achieved, and 2 remaining measures are not applicable for that reporting period. The key shifts since the third quarter forecast, which was provided to the committee in June, are outlined in paragraph 7. So just note that of those, 4 of those measures have now been achieved, so with some additional effort in the fourth quarter. The measures that have not been achieved, which is set out in the report, a percentage of sampled catchment works maintained to an effective condition, and the commentary there notes that a high proportion of the samples conducted this year were in the Upper Waikato and Taupo zones, and it was not an unexpected result, given that those are the largest and oldest soil schemes in the region. And staff have noted that maintenance on those properties will be a focus for the 25-26. Also noting that the development of the Regional Resilience Strategy and Plan has not been achieved. This target had been highlighted to the committee previously as being at risk of non-completion, and there'll be a continuing effort throughout 25-26 to progress that project. The third measure that's not achieved was the year-on-year passenger rail growth target, and this is primarily attributed to the closures in the Auckland end of the journey, relating to the City Rail link work that's been undertaken there, and particularly many of those closures have aligned with school holidays, which have historically been the busiest periods on the service. So those results that are attached to the report will be provided to Audit New Zealand, and an audit process will be undertaken. The final results are scheduled to be adopted by the new council in October.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jane. And I guess there shouldn't be any surprises. The ones that are in red are generally the ones that are in red because they're less easy to control. So it's clear. I have no questions on it. It's really, it follows what one would expect. So,
Can I
you
just
got
make
a
a
question?
comment,
Sorry, yes, sure.
Mr.
Go.
Chair? Yeah,
Go.
just on the transport one, because it always opens my eyes up on that one. I mean, 20 days is quite a big chunk, you know, because of what's happening in Auckland with that. So do we know that is that a trend that happens every year? I mean, this is kind of the first time that, you know, 260 down to 240 or 280 down to 260, 20 days is huge. And for that reason, for us not making the KPI, is there any way that, you know, because it's out of our control, has that been a thing year on year? Because with what's happened up in Auckland with the railway network that's getting rebuilt?
And I understand it's been worse for this period with the timing of some of those closures. But Phil, you look like you may want to speak to that.
I can add a little to that. Yes. So in mid-December last year, the minister became involved in the work that had been undertaken to prepare for the City Rail link in Auckland. And at that time, they totally changed the way that they would be undertaking the track improvement works across the whole of the Auckland network. So the first few stages of what's been called the Auckland Rail Network rebuild were undertaken effectively on weekends and long weekends. And they've changed that now to focus on 2-week full closures of parts of the track network to undertake that work in bigger blocks. So that impacted us through a longer closure in January and then longer closures through each of the school holidays through 2025. Our understanding is that at the end of 2025, that work will be mostly finished and the impact on us should then be a lot less going into 2026 and beyond. But we've just been stuck with the impact of them delivering that wider package of work.
So what I'm kind of asking is, can we put that in the report that we would have reached the KPI if it wasn't for that? Because that we would have reached it, wouldn't we?
I'm confident that we would. Whether the committee wants to do that and it's a suggestive statement as opposed to an objective statement would be the question. But
well, I just can't remember well enough the last ICM, but just as an example, just taking the ICM one as an example, does that have a process to automatically go through to ICM committee to back to them to update on progress with that maintenance issue? And because I think we should probably think about how best to do that.
Yes.
So it's not for
Yep.
this committee to get the details of maintenance, but
No,
it is something the ICM should just have a bit of.
Yeah, and if I can note through the chair, when these results were presented to ELT, I did ask the question in terms if this is the result and we weren't anticipating that third quarter reporting, is there an impact of the survey findings on the planned program of works for 25, 26, or have we got the resourcing and the level of that
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there is absolutely a feedback loop that needs to happen through DMC and the impact of these results on that sort of forward planning.
I mean, you should just make a note to Greg for
Yeah.
that one and make sure it gets
Yeah.
reported.
Thanks, Stu. Anybody have any other questions? Not, we'll put resolution. These results be accepted. Seconded. Favour? Thanks, Jane.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. David? David, and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning.
Financial Performance Monitoring Report.
Got a couple of slides to share as well, just to summarise the report.
Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, to summarise the report for the year ended 30th of June 2025, we finished the year with an operating surplus of $1.907 million. And that's against a forecast of 8.376 million deficit, so a favourable position. After considering reserve transfers, the decrease that we see in retained earnings is 2.678 million favourable. In terms of the key drivers for these positions, so from a revenue perspective, 4.4 million favourable versus the forecast. The largest contributors being additional government grant revenue, in particular received around the Kanoa flood resilience funding and with respect to North Island weather events recovery. We see higher interest income from working capital funds and another good performance investment income fund following the recovery in Q. In terms of expenditure variances, so our total cost of service is just shy of 6 million favourable versus our Q3 forecast, largely driven by an underspend in contracted services, the details of which are in the report. I think you'll find those on page 70 of the agenda. But some of the big contributors include the underspend in biosecurity, catchment planning, 1.3 million following the delay in the Sugarloaf Wharf invoicing into 25-26, and a few other larger ones as well, many of which, it should be noted, have been identified as proposed carryovers. Offsetting that partially are higher than forecast depreciation costs, and that's as a result of recent capitalisation activity over the course of this year, and losses on disposal, which are not included in our forecast. From a capital expenditure perspective, we ended the year spending just over $20 million versus a forecast of 23.6. Operating capital expenditure was 2 million favourable. Again, details are in the report, but some of the key drivers are underspends around animal pest equipment, lower than expected spending on our EV depots, and some delays in our fleet vehicles into the next financial year. And from an infrastructure capital perspective, we finished the year just under 1.5 million favourable versus the Q3 forecast. So a total programme spend of just over 50. Also in the report, there's a summary of our closing reserve balances, you'll note, and that also predicts how those reserves are expected to be spent over the next 3 years. And that's as a result of the kind of planning and budgeting process that we've recently gone through. In terms of carryovers, so the budget requested to be carried over to 2026, we have total carryover requests of 9.732 million of operating expenditure. And on top of that, there's $3.4 million of operating capital expenditure carryovers. In terms of the reserve and borrowing related carryovers, there's much more detail in your report, breaking those items down. And in terms of the key general rate funded carryovers, there's some detail there on screen of the main drivers for that, just shy of 2.6 million. From a capital expenditure carryover perspective, it should be noted that it's operating capital that was being requested of 3.44 million. I'd like to highlight that in your report on page 63, the explanations for that, for those drivers are incorrect, and the ones on screen are the main drivers for the 3. It's probably worth highlighting that there are no infrastructure capital requests this year, and that's following a detailed review of the programme through the recent forecast and annual planning processes. So in summary, based on the draft financial performance to the end of 30th of June, we have 4.96 million of operating funds available to be considered for carryover. This funding is sufficient to carry over the requests of just under $5 million of carryover. And once we consider those, there are unallocated surplus funds of 2.549 million available for the council to allocate.
Thank you, David. Very good. I've just got a couple of questions, and I think you've probably corrected. I haven't gone through your slide and checked it, but some of the totals didn't add up on the numbers that are being carried over. So I will have a look at that later on. Do you know the difference contribution that Kanoa made and what our actual costs were? Is that a negative sum game, or was there a benefit to the regional council or a cost to the regional council?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what the Kanoa funding received was. I think it's this year to just under 3 million, perhaps.
I think it's 4 million.
So if I can help that, Mr. Chair, it will be an offset to funding that council would otherwise get to have did, but council will still be making to definitely beneficial to us, but at free lunch.
So there's a net cost to the council as a result of the.
Yes, but
TV.
that was planned capital works that would have occurred anyway.
Yep.
So the benefit that we've achieved is that central government funding contribution, which reduces.
Okay, thank you. The other question, David, there's that loss on disposals, quite a significant sum. But have we had a look at the reasons why? Is it our depreciation policy, which is appropriate, or for that?
So the detail behind it, so I understand there's been 188 assets that have been disposed of over the course of the year, the majority of which are related to asset replacement, and some of those are significant disposal costs where assets have been placed ahead of their expected life. So from our perspective, we're working with the asset team just to understand how we can better improve our processes around forecasting that.
So that will enable a review of the appropriateness of the depreciation rates that we charge.
Again, if I can just add a comment to that, yes, both depreciation rates, but I guess the understanding of that asset replacement program, there effectively what this is saying is we've placed assets while they still have in use there, and so we're having to write that difference. So just checking out asset management processes that we have useful life set correctly for the residual life aligned with when needs to be replaced. But where we know that that's a planned activity, that at least there's some or the ability to recognise that's likely to be.
So is that something that should be carried forward? Something to be picked up on or not? That happen as the matter of your internal review?
Yeah, I think given the significance of those values, which is greater than I've seen previously, but probably reflective of the catch up with capitalisation work that's happened, as well as the work that the asset team have done around their program planning. The extent of it is new, so I think we just need together to understand how can we better project that. Ideally,
Robbie, you got a question?
Are those issues basically what Chris has explained earlier, most probably with ICM and others, that there isn't a good strategy of what is actually forecasted of asset renewal over, like we're looking at. So is that a part of that issue, or?
through the chair, yes, I think it is in terms of understanding. So we have the program for next year, but we
Yep.
don't have the program in detail beyond that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
And
sorry.
then I guess understanding the current state and remaining life of the assets that are actually being replaced, so that if we're replacing it now, but in the books, it actually says it's got another 10 years of life, that there's an accounting of that. I guess at the end of the day, council has paid the capital for those assets, but what this does is sort of removes the mechanism by which we're recovering the funding.
Just related question to that, Janine. Thinking specifically of my old pet, Matakaraka,
Yeah,
where we've got a asset which not serves it was designed to do, and we've got a significant reserve against that. So none of these assets that have. So I'm asking that question because reserve has to go first.
yeah,
Check the
actually,
city officer.
it's a very good question in terms of the release of revaluation reserve disposal.
There's some-
Yeah, we'll
That was
need to
something
look
I
at that
raised
as part
last
of
year.
our annual. Yes, and there's a separate conversation impairment.
Stu, if you've got.
Oh,
Dave.
thanks. Just want to check, so on page 70 on our PDFs, there's a graph there showing consultancy by groups of activities. That's our total consultant spend for the 12 months, is it? So it's roughly 1 point.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
1.3.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Do we have an actual number of that? Somewhere, won't we?
I think it's 1.33.
1.330.
One
Something.
point
Yeah.
330.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just noticed there's a figure of 16.9 million being actual.
Yes.
That was last year, 24 year.
I'm not sure. This is a fairly typical level of expenditure. So we do, I guess David and I know this number because we've got a Lagoima that's floating around at the moment in terms of detail of our consultancy spend. I actually think that number is probably overstated and that some of the costs sitting in there are actually contracted services rather than consultancy. If we look at the strict definition of contracted services being a service delivery choice and consultancy being that specialist advice that we need to seek. So we just need to make sure, and it's with potential changes in legislation requiring us to report these numbers quickly, we need to be really clear and sure that we've got that separation done well. But I don't believe, I haven't got enough of me, but Chris probably does, given the look on his face, in terms of that this is a fairly typical level of expenditure around.
Because I know the chairman
consultants.
just said that it was 10.9 last year, yeah, that it's only 1.4 this year.
Depends what definition included in the figures. If it, do have a report which gives that 16.9.
That's through, Mr. Chair. I have had a couple of requests about that, where the source of that information's come from. I might talk with you after the
That's
meeting
where it comes from.
about that. Thanks.
Thank you.
And could we have the So the response from that discussion circulated to the committee? Yeah. Thank you.
One other question I had, and it's probably not worth raising, but it must have been about, it was before Christmas, we had a lot of pressure put on council to approve spending for Golden Clam. Sorts of weird and wonderful equipment we had to purchase so that we could take our legislative requirements. Now finding that that money wasn't spent, so can we throw that back into the kitty? Does it have to be spent? I guess I'm asking the wrong person, sorry, David, but
And it remains on the list for proposed carryovers for
So
next year.
it's
So
plan
the
to spend
request
it
is
at
still
some
there.
stage. It wasn't as urgent as it was made out to be. But anybody, any other questions? If not, we have a resolution. The budget carryovers be approved. Second that, all in favour? Carried. David, thanks for your report. Very
you.
good.
Sorry,
And,
through you, Mr. Chair, just as you noted in your presentation, some of the numbers were not what was reported in
In the
the
report, correct.
report. So if you can just distribute that to the committee members, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
wasn't my calculator after all. Thanks, David. So, the cow, they here, so we'll move on to the Treasury report.
Luke will walk in the room. No, happy to take this report. I haven't had anything to say that he's arrived yet, so
Thanks, Janine.
he
We'll-
probably
we'll-
won't be far away.
We'll miss
Probably, yeah.
7.5, defer 7.5
Yep.
until Luke arrives and ask Janine to do the Treasury and Management Monitoring Report. I assume you're doing it.
Yes, yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this gives the committee an oversight in terms of performance and placement of the investment fund. Obviously, performance of financial markets in the last quarter of the financial year resulted in an overall favourable position for the fund at the end of the year. There was quite the about turn from the second quarter performance. What that means is, I guess, in terms of our equalisation reserve, which is the fund that takes the pluses and minuses on an annual basis, we have been able to recover a large portion of the deficit that has been sitting there, was sitting there at the beginning of the year. So from a deficit of 5.8 million, that position has been recovered to a deficit of 2.6 million. Probably a couple of things that I'd just like to note for the committee, more around, I guess, the other aspects of Treasury management outside of the investment fund. We note there in the report in terms of our working capital funds and also our external borrowing program. I think I've noted for the committee previously that we're really leaning into our working capital funds rather than necessarily taking out new borrowing. I've been working with PwC, who are our Treasury advisors, with the revised forecast in terms of our cash flow, as well as the projection of our borrowing requirements, for them to provide us with a strategy of recommendations for the investment of those working capital funds, but equally a grossing up of our borrowing program to actually match that with the level of borrowing that we should have based on those activities that we've undertaken that are loan funded. So that would initially see our borrowing increase from the current 39 million that we hold up to 52, and I think there's another 5 or 6 million increase that's projected this year. Alongside that, given that increase in value, we'll also be re-engaging around the credit rating process and discussion. So it's likely that any new borrowing would be undertaken on a short-term basis to allow us to refinance that once we have that credit rating. But that's probably a key shift for us in terms of the level of borrowing that we're currently holding versus where I see that going over a few months.
So can I ask a question, Janine?
Yeah.
Is there does the break-even point for that move on a linear scale, depending on the interest rates, or is there a change? Margins you can borrow at and lend at.
Yeah.
Does that would change the margin? So have you got a method of
In
monitoring it on a regular
terms of
basis?
the cost of the credit rating,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, the
Yeah.
full equation of
Yeah.
that
so
decision-making.
the break-even point that we've been advised is about the $60 million level, and that's based on I think it's the 5 basis points reduced borrowing cost that you're able to achieve as a rated council through the LGFA. So that benefit is fixed at the 5 basis points. So effectively it's 5 basis points against 60 million of being the saving and the approximate cost to actually maintain that credit rating on an annual basis.
Knowing how professional fees have worked, that 60 million is probably now 70 million. That's that equation that I'm seeking, because there's an annual, there's a compliance cost, then there's an annual compliance cost as well.
So the actual cost to the rating agency is interestingly, I think, is shifting lower.
Oh, wonderful.
There have been shifts around, obviously there's 2 rating agencies of Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and the relative costs of those, and the views of those different agencies in terms of local government in New Zealand, so the credit worthiness of the sector. In talking to PwC earlier this week, those costs are actually starting to shift downwards.
Okay, good.
So, but that will be part of, I guess, the evaluation and a recommendation back to the committee around costs and benefits of taking that move. So at the moment, it's been based on that borrowing margin of the benefit of 5
5
basis
points.
points. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Anybody else have any questions? Sorry, you finished your report?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody have any questions of Janine? Not, I'll the motion that Treasury Management monitoring to 30th June be approved.
Luke's arrived, so.
Thank you. Bobby, seconded. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank
So,
you.
Mr. Chair, if the committee's happy to continue for now, I see that Luke has just arrived, so I can.
All right, we'll go back to
Grab him.
item 7.5 on the agenda then. Thank you.
Moment.
Anybody want a break at this stage? So do you want to have 10 minutes or? Is that all right? Is that all right, Janine? You happy with that? Okay, thanks. Morning tea time, gents. Ladies.